I don't know how many of you guys were at the Voice at CES session in January of 2020, kind of the last hurrah before COVID. And at the time, you would have thought that 3 years later, this would probably be the largest session on the main stage, and it should be. So thank you for being so kind of thought forward that you realize what a big deal voice is. If you'd been here at CES 10 years ago, in 2013, everything was about what? 3D television, right? Everything was about 3D TV. And how many folks in this room actually have a 3D TV in their room? Or, all right, 2, 3. That's the lunatic fringe is always present. But it has not become kind of mainstream, right? And what that tells us is that the whole industry can be wrong about tech. And what our clients ask us all the time is, what is the next big thing and why? And we've said for a long time, it's voice, but you wouldn't be remiss if you believed that kind of right now, we might have missed the wave, or there might not be a wave coming at all, right? It was, 4 or 5 years ago, the fastest adoption of any tech in human history, faster than the smartphone, in terms of how fast Siri was accepted, how fast Alexa was accepted. But over the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of started to stagnate, right? And things like this have happened before. And sometimes in the Gartner hype cycle, they come back, and sometimes they don't. And the question we're all trying to figure out is voice going to come back? And how is it going to come back? And so what we believe is that the reason that voice adoption has slowed or plateaued is because we're using it wrong, right, as an industry. That we've kind of screwed this whole thing up a little bit. And that is not uncommon at all when a new technology happens. If you go back to the earliest days of TV, it was really broadcasts of plays and broadcasts of radio broadcasts. It took a long time to get to the highly developed medium of reality television, right? And so we're doing the same thing with voice. I was at AOL in London in 2000, 2001, and the hottest thing at AOL in 2000, 2001 was mobile. It was WAP, and WAP sucked. But we all kind of knew mobile was going to be a big deal, and then eventually it became a big deal. And you know, in history right now, it's easy to look back and say, oh, Steve Jobs introduced the smartphone, and then mobile happened. When you lived it, that's not what happened. It was a decade of iteration, of iteration, of iteration that finally ended up with a device that changed the world, and then that was copied. And now when you look at usage, it's 2/3, 3/4, or in some countries, 90% of all digital usage is on our mobile devices. And so is voice going to do that, or is voice not going to do that? That's the big question. Our position is voice is very much going to do that once we figure out how to solve the 2 biggest problems we have. The first one is trust, is we are not creating a platform that the end user trusts. And when you think about trust, you got to go back and really do some work as to why do humans trust each other, right? And trust is made up of 2 things, emotional trust and cognitive trust. Emotional trust is also can be considered biases, right? It is the reaction we typically have to another human being in the first 5 seconds of seeing them or meeting them. I know very well that all of you have judged me already, right? It is a fact. Now, your judgment might change over time, but that judgment, that changes, happens is cognitive trust. And that's ultimately based on, does this human being do what they say they're going to do? And in your relationship with a human being, but also with a machine, with an animal, with anything, it starts with emotional trust. That puppy's so cute. And it goes into cognitive trust. This is a great watchdog, right? That's just how we're wired. And right now, I would posit that we're not doing either very well in voice. And so this is kind of an example.
Hello, Jimmy.
Wow. Long time no see. You were on the show before.
It has been exactly 575 days since I last saw you.
So that's kind of what's going on right now in some sense with voice. And This was a phenomenon that was discovered in the 1970s in Japan as they started building robots, and they called it the uncanny valley. And the idea was that the more human-like you make something that's not actually human, the more freaked out we become. And there's all kinds of theories on it. It could be because it's a corpse, it's a zombie, whatever it is. But one of the problems we've got right now is that we're trying to make a voice assistants more human and make them more human-like interaction, but they're nowhere close to human. Any user knows that. And so we're actually freaking people out, and we're breaking trust right out of the gate the first time they interact with a voice experience. By most analysis, in terms of human communication, over half of it, some studies say over 90%, are things that are not just the voice communication. It is everything else that is going on in that communication. When we build voice bots that are voice only, we are ignoring everything else. And people try and put like groans and sighs into them. I think that makes it all worse because it's even faker than it was before to the end user. But what we're forgetting is we're already developing this paralanguage with devices. It's just not voice to voice. It's something else. It might be touch. It might be your phone vibrating when you put your password in wrong. It might be the Siri indicator that Siri's listening. Those are all communications that are very similar to body language, called paralanguage, right? And so we're not taking advantage of that. So that's emotional trust. The second piece is cognitive trust. What problem does voice solve? At the end of the day, the main thing that voice solves is that it's faster. We can speak 3 times as fast as we can type on a keyboard, 5 times as fast as we can type on a mobile device. And here's an example.
2 large pizzas with pepperoni, mushroom, and onion, thin crust. 1 medium meat lover's pizza, add mushrooms, no lamb sausage. 3 small margarita pizzas, no basil, add pepperoni, gluten-free crust.
So what you'll see that kind of happens in this kind of simulation is that you can order something semi-complicated, like 3 pizzas, in about 4 times as fast as you can today in a mobile app, which is already a huge advancement over the web, huge advancement over other things. This is the breakthrough, right? And if you notice kind of how that was built, there was a lot going on, but one of them was that you could see the words as you were speaking them, and that gave you even more trust that the system was picking up what you were doing and that it was reacting properly. And if it ended up not doing what you thought it was supposed to do, you could figure that out later. And so this is the speed thing, right? And that's the magic, and that's why all of us want to talk to Alexa and talk to Siri. The problem is that we can read way faster than we can listen. We all want to talk to Alexa. We all want to talk to Siri. None of us want to listen to them, right? Because it's actually slower. And this is the cognitive trust piece. We've now put a system in front of users that's actually worse than the system they had before, which was apps and websites, because we're responding to them in voice. The example I always use is, you want to talk to Regal Cinemas, you want to say, what movies are playing on Friday night? You don't want to listen to Alexa tell you the 8 movies with 3 showtimes at each theater. For those of you my age, that was freaking movie phone, and that was 30 years ago, right? And it wasn't that great then, other than you didn't have to buy a newspaper. So that's something else that used to happen. But because reading is so much faster, there is a breakthrough, and that is multimodal. And that is where we think this is all going, is we're going to speak to machines, but the response from machines to us is not going to be listening. It's not a voice bot. We are going to have a multimodal experience where the machine gives us feedback via text, via images or graphics, or via other haptics. And so I'd like to share with you some research from the field that we do all the time for clients that kind of bring this a little bit to life.
I need the entire number, and I just can't locate it.
So these are all kind of voice experiences, right, where you are in the future going to tell your app what to do. And if you notice, a lot of these things are what we call kind of long tail items, right? It's not necessarily check your balance, because we can all check our balance pretty easily on our app. But an example I love to use is order checks. If I told everyone right now, take your app out and order new checks from your bank, everyone's already, heart rate's going up, because you know it's going to be a giant fucking pain in the ass. And that is the exact, so US Bank, as an example, has told us many times they have 300 features in their apps. There is no logical way to organize 300 features on an iPhone screen. It's impossible. So the only cut through to making that happen is voice. Another example is long tail search, right? So if you have people searching for local stores, or people searching, like employees searching for parts for a machine, right? It might be 7 or 8 or 10 words. People don't want to type that. But voice is going to open up a whole new search environment where you can get to the right answer much more quickly, because voice makes the data entry part of that so much faster.
Have that really quick technology where you could access the information you need quickly would be really awesome.
Show me my account balances.
Here are your Willow Tree bank account balances.
Show me my transactions.
Here are your recent checking account transactions.
Dispute Oak City Realty charge.
Done. Check your Willow Tree.
So anyway, so you can see kind of how this pattern works and what we're going to get used to. And I think how we're going to know this is working is you're going to start seeing these mic buttons in apps everywhere. You see it already. You see it in Waze. You see it in Spotify. All these use cases where you just want to tell your app what to do. It's going to be pervasive, and I think it's going to be the dominant way that we interface with our applications. Brett Kinsella, he runs VoiceBot.ai. In 2019, he said there will be thousands of voice assistants. In 2021, he said there will be millions of voice assistants, because this concept of one overarching voice assistant that, like a Siri or Alexa that we use for everything, will go away. Instead, every brand will have its own voice assistant living inside the app, living inside the website. And so one of the things that we've done at Willow Tree, and I'll just spend a couple minutes on it, is figuring out how to orchestrate this, because this is a super complicated problem for companies to solve, because you need design, you need strategy,
it really
you
is
need it to
interesting
come all
think
together.
about voice in the context of the history of how we interact with machines.
We've been using keyboards. We've been using our fingers to communicate with machines, which is incredibly unnatural to human beings.
We don't expect typing into a screen to go away, right? This is a new way, this is an additional way of interacting with our machines. And that doesn't come along very often, so it's a really, really big deal.
This multimodal approach is the future.
When you think about implementing a voice solution, you have to have all these different things to come together. They include design, strategy, ethics. They include the tech stack. They include testing. All of that has to come together. And Willow Tree's voice innovation team is uniquely positioned to help our clients think through all these implications before they even start on the project.
So I work with clients across all sorts of industries to figure out how technology can help drive their business outcomes and solve real customer needs.
I work with the Open Voice Network. I lead the ethical use task force there, and we've come up with 6 ethical principles that companies should follow or individuals should follow when creating voice experiences.
One, from a design perspective, you have the ability to brand your assistants in-app, right? So when you think about tone, or you think about the pair language, or you think about the speed of how people are gonna be approaching this.
Speed is a barrier, but I don't think it's the biggest one. I think it's education and people not knowing how to use the technology.
It's a whole new bag of problems and an exciting space to play in.
I think we're on the verge of a tipping point where people are going to start to trust, rely on, and use voice in everyday complex interactions with the brands that they interact with most.
It will never be the only way that we communicate with machines, but it will be the primary way that we communicate with machines in many, many scenarios. The true power of voice, it is getting back to our most natural, our most human way of communicating. And so we've made a big bet on voice as a company. We really believe this. Earlier this week, we announced that Willow Tree was being acquired by TELUS International. And the entire reason for doing that deal was because this future of voice is starting to happen. If you don't know who TELUS International is, it's one of the largest BPO firms in the world. They have call centers with over 70,000 people in them. And we believe that for the foreseeable future, meaning our lifetimes, the AI automated voice components of this aren't going to solve all the problems, right? There will always be a need for human beings to answer the phone for large brands, but making that extraordinarily seamless so that, you know, when you're, the example I always use, if you're trying to leave Vegas tomorrow and your flight gets canceled and you try and rebook it on the app and it doesn't work, you might go to the website, doesn't work, you do a chat bot, doesn't work, and finally you're like, fuck it, I got to call. And what happens when you call? Authenticate yourself. How can I help you, Mr. Jones? You're starting over for the fourth time. And tying all that together is kind of what we think is the future of customer experience and why we did that deal. And I think for any brand in the world right now, tying all those experiences together to create one cohesive experience for both employees and customers and consumers is the work of the next decade. So thank you.